Hello everybody and welcome to Planet SkyFF, the world where everything revolves around £880.
£40 or
There
something.
we go. Better than a kick in the balls, mate. Better than a kick in the balls.
Definitely.
50 grand is done and dusted. It's not coming your way or my way. But congratulations to whoever won it. Who did win it in the end?
Whoever won it. He tested me now, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Was it... I'll edit that bit out of the audio. Thomas Lovell won it by a point.
Oh, 1 point.
Unless he hasn't had his Edison points removed. Don't know if you saw that at
I
the
haven't
weekend.
seen that, no.
It was a little bit of an adjustment on Monday because Edison had been given penalty save points twice over and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Didn't affect me. Where did you finish, Suj?
3,000 in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What exactly?
3,076.
Oh, right, well, it's not 3,000 then.
Nah. But yeah, I mean, the last quarter of the season was particularly difficult, and we'll talk about it. Yeah.
30th for me. Very pleased with that in the end because I was kind of clinging to a top 50 a little bit with no transfers left. So
the amount you yo-yoed at the end, and I say yo-yo from, it was still a window, but I mean to get back up to 30th, I think was higher than I expected you to finish.
I was kind of yo-yoing between about 25th and 60th for a number of weeks towards the end.
Yeah.
So
and then you can easily, dangerously at that point, go the other way outside the top 100, but you stayed within a window of acceptability.
Yeah, I sat here last week, didn't I, and had a big moan about buying Dubravka, but actually, those little points that he got me at the end was a right touch, mate. So, I mean, he got me 2 9-pointers, 18 points, Sheffield United and Fulham. Actually, he made the transfer from Pope to Dubravka almost worthwhile in the end.
Nice.
Double Liverpool defensive. Robertson and Trent coming through in the Burnley and the Palace games. Don't think many had 2 of them.
Yeah.
He's essentially... And Rob Holding, actually, to be fair. Passing tier against Palace, 9-pointer against Brighton on Sunday. It was the defensive guys at the end, which was the little bit of differential for me that kind of carried me to a decent rank. I am pleased and I'm not pleased. And I'm going to sound ungrateful about finishing 30th. But I think if you'd have said to me at Christmas, you're going to finish 30th, I think I'd have been disappointed. But then having dropped back sort of before second overhaul time and that, I probably would have taken that finish.
Mate, it was a difficult season for some, but you did very, very well. We're going to analyse our seasons this year, and we've got to give a massive shout out to Badman Frank. I think he needs a nickname, and I think considering how awesome his web pages, they're not PDFs. They're
maybe FF stuff would work nicely.
FF stuff that he's put it on, but I don't know if these URLs are fully available to everybody. But but we got to give Badman Frank. That's going to be his nickname now.
Badman Frank.
Yeah, man.
He might not like that.
He might not, but I just feel like he's
He's a bad man.
Dangerous. Yeah, man. But these reports are badass. That's why they are, mate. I'm just looking at it now and I'm like, wow, okay, let's have an interesting look. I've got your stats for the season and my stats for the season up in front of me. And we can compare them. And in the end, James, you finished 400, just under 400 points ahead of me. 380 points ahead of me. I finished on 3,143 points. You had 3,523. So call it 380 points, of which 250 of them were from the captain's armband, mate. You scored 250 more captain points than me. I scored a grand total of 1,616 captain points. You had 1,864, so 250 points were captain points, mate. So it just goes to show in terms of managing your captain how important it is. I mean, captain points made up a higher percentage of your overall score as a result of that, by a couple of percent, so it makes a big difference. That's probably where I really kind of let myself down.
And the fact you only used 38 transfers.
Yeah, that's true as well. I could have used a couple more. Let's give me another 20 points.
Did you not use your transfers on the last day?
Nah, I was feeling rough, mate. At this point, I was done. I basically was in a place where I was like, COVID can go fuck itself. The stats that I looked at that I found most interesting, but actually is the same for both of us is number of different captains is 38. We both used 38 different captains throughout the season. I don't feel like I captained 38 different players. I find it weird to think I even owned 38 different players.
How many players did you own? Because it's right at the top there on the front sheet.
Number of players owned 52.
I had 54.
So only 2 players different.
It's similar.
Yeah, so of the 50-something players, we captained... Most of them got at least one shout of the armband. 38
majority.
out of 50.
I mean,
majority got one shout of the armband.
Quite a few of mine was sort of pre-overhaul that I had, like Bolly,
Single game
Ramsdale,
days
Saint Maximin. Never stuck the armband on any of them. Luca Dean. Quite a few of mine were players I had pre-first overhaul, just carrying me through for the first 4 game weeks, so I never stuck the armband on.
Yeah. And obviously a lot of the single game days that there were, we might have had similar captains or a player from a Leeds or Pope at Burnley or whatever getting you through these single game days. So that's where the spread, I guess, comes from. And then when the big boys are playing, we usually have one of the players from the big boys.
Yep.
How the hell is Kevin De Bruyne the third highest scoring player for me this season? He hasn't played half the flipping season.
He is for me too.
Wow. Unbelievable. How?
I think 218 points I got from KDB for a points per game average of 13.6. How does that look for you?
13.8, 263.
Okay, so you had him a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think it's because when you add him, invariably you captain him as well. And I think this game became a lot easier for a lot of people this year because KDB didn't show himself up to be an essential, basically.
Yeah.
And you could then have... Everybody was having sort of Kane and Fernandes, weren't they? There was a few people like myself kind of left Salah for long periods. I mean, Salah, for me... I got 7 players who scored more points for me than Mo Salah this year. I only got 130 points off Mo Salah. And I probably would have captained him for quite a bit of that as well. So I've gone for long periods this season without Mohamed Salah.
Salah was less for me, 120 points, mate.
Well, I got more points from Bamford and Calvert-Lewin than Salah.
I got more points than Stuart Dallas. I got 238 points from Stuart Dallas this season.
I got 45.
Wow.
Oh, it's a big mistake.
It's interesting.
Big mistake not having
his
Dallas.
points per game is quite low, 7, Stuart Dallas, compared to some of the big hitters. But that's probably because I didn't captain him a lot, whereas the others did get captaincy. So, it's funny, like, how there's a massive drop-off from your top 4 or 5 players down to your next 5th, 6th, 7th. There's a 100-point drop-off all of a sudden in how they contribute to your team.
How many points you got from Bruno and Kane?
Bruno and Kane combined 695.
I am 698. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Our third player is... you had 218 of Kevin De Bruyne. I had 263. And I had Dallas 4th at 238. You dropped down to Diaz at 191. So my top 4 players scored more than your top 4 players. So does that mean I beat you or something?
No, it means I had better other picks.
Other than that, when you go down the list, I mean, your top 10 players all got you over 100 points. Not the case for me. My long tail, as they call it, James, was basically crap.
How many times did you pick the best captain on each game day? You think you were about 50-something%, I think.
Percentage times captained highest scoring player on game day, 53%. 60, boy. 60. I feel like there's a game of top trumps.
I think I'm winning. The highest I think I've seen is, I think, Reece SkyFF, 66%. Right. So it's 2/3 of the time he's picking the best player as his captain. That's phenomenal, really.
Yeah. Very, very good. And obviously you can have a player, he's probably got days where he has picked a player that's returned. It just doesn't happen to be the highest returner. And there were a number of days where you've got Kane and Salah and Bruno all playing. Like it's fine margins on those days. So he's probably still had captaincy returns on the other days as well.
You talk about swings. My lowest scoring player in a match this season, I think it's the same for a lot of people. Virgil van Dijk in the 7-2 defeat to Aston Villa. -4 points. And the best bit about that is, I don't know if you owned Jack Grealish that day, but Jack Grealish got a 25-pointer, didn't he? So if you'd have captained Grealish 50-pointer, -4.
That's a massive swing.
It's a huge swing. But then it's one of them, you can look at it captain hindsight and go, oh my God, that one game would have been like a 54-point swing. But not many of us would have been captain Grealish in that fixture prior to it happening.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can look back and regret on things like that.
No, definitely not. But when I look at the total points difference between us, 380 and 250 to 60 of that is just captaincy, sorting my captaincy out. I'm actually really heartened with thinking that there's not that, like, I don't need an overhaul of my game to be back in the chance of a top 100 and top 200. I just need to tighten up a few small things. I mean, simple stat. Game days with no player taking part. How many did you have, James?
None.
Exactly. I had 4 days that I missed.
But that's interesting because I saw Ian Parrin post that he missed one. And his original thought was that perhaps if he'd missed more game days, he might have ended up with more points. Ian had a storming finish this season. We ended up finishing a little bit behind myself. But I think his reaction was he should have missed more single game days and it would have done him good. But then as I messaged him and said, I was on 0. So I don't think there's an exact science or graphic to explain whether you should be missing more or not. I don't look back at many of the single game days and think what a complete waste that was. Because it's not often I've gone in, bought a player for a single game day. There's a couple that haven't worked out for me. Like going back to Matip the second time, useless when I should have. That was the biggest mistake of the season, I think. Going back for Matip when Salah was the sub against Burnley. Because it cost me multiple transfers.
Yeah.
Then he fucked himself again. And then ended up buying Thiago Silva. He fucked himself when he was locked on for 40 points basically against Tottenham and Sheffield United. Went off injured against Tottenham, didn't he? He was nearly on passing to. Went off after about 5 minutes, I think. He was not quite.
How many points for a clean sheet does a defender get? 6, isn't it? 5?
Oh, crap. 5, isn't it? 5.
I'm just looking here. You kept 20 more clean sheets than me. That's 100 points. But you may have had more defenders than me. The one that I'm really blown away by is how little difference there is on the tier points between us.
Yeah.
456 versus 476. I've always had in my mind that one of the things that I haven't made enough of an effort to understand, and you definitely do much better than me, is tier points. When a defender's going to have more possession in a game so they can pick up passing tiers, who's good for tackling tiers, shot tiers, who gets off more shots than anybody else. I don't really look at it that much, but in the end, it hasn't really been an advantage of yours necessarily because you've only scored 20 points more than me on bonus over the. There was
one thing that really stood out for me actually in your season, and it was the amount of times you had 4 in midfield as a formation.
Okay. So
I used 4-4-2 23% of the time. Yours is very different.
Yeah, 43.
Was massive.
So
how many times did you use 3-4-3? I had 22% of the time.
3-4-3, 22% of the time as well.
Okay. So that difference of 4-4-2 for you, that's high. Considering the midfield area has been a bit of a graveyard this season. And I think that's a big difference.
Yeah, picking the right formation. You will have played more defenders over the season than me, for sure.
I'd say, I mean, I played 5 at the back 12% of the time. 4-3-3 was the most common formation that I played, 40% of the time.
Okay.
Yourself?
4-3-3 was the most common, right, for you?
Yeah, I think yours is 4-4-2, isn't it?
4-4-2 by far.
I think that's a big deal, actually.
Yeah.
It's not to say you shouldn't go 4-4-2 next year, for example, but I think this season you had loads of budget forward options, which at various stages were decent. Bamford, Calvert-Lewin, Watkins, these guys weren't... Iheanacho at the end. These guys weren't expensive, right? You're sitting there with 4 in midfield, and quite often... There must have been times this season we were looking at going, fucking hell, I wish I could play 5-1-4. Just have Bruno in there. Yeah. So I think that's impacted you quite a bit. But you're right, though. Looking at, say, to total goals, I only scored, 6 more than you, I think, from my players.
Yeah, goals wasn't huge. Clean sheets was huge. Goals and assists, there wasn't a massive difference.
That was the big one. It was how many clean sheets did you have?
59. You had 78. Yeah. Goals and assists wasn't a big difference. 5 or 6 in it between them. But clean sheets was massive.
How
He
many-
played more defenders than me.
How many goalkeeper points did you have?
Goalkeeper points was 230, which is a bit less than you. You got 280, didn't you?
Defender points, what did you have?
1,000. Oh, it's just gone off my screen, James. 900, sorry.
So I got 1,046.
140 points there.
Midfielders?
1,176.
See, that's not big enough in comparison to mine. One's 1,132. When considering you're regularly playing 4 in there.
Yeah.
And your forwards?
837.
Ooh. But that's because you're going 4-4-2 a lot, isn't it? I got 1,061.
Yeah, and I went differential on a number of players, like Jota over Salah, Son over Kane, at different periods. So, yeah.
I used 9 goalkeepers.
9 goalkeepers.
That's not bad, is it?
I used 5. We had 18. I had 18 defenders. You had 19. I had 17 midfielders. You had 14, and we both had 12 strikers over the course of the season.
I still believe that goalkeeper move is such a get out of jail card so often.
Yeah.
It's the fullback go-to, I think, when you're in trouble and you need coverage for single game days.
Yeah.
So I had 9 goalkeepers this year, but I don't think I'd never had Edison or Allison. He had Martinez for a bit. I had Meslier for a bit.
Yeah.
Patricio didn't do me too bad that run. I obviously jumped to Pope. I would have stayed with Pope and he not got injured. I had Bravka for the end. I had Leno for a period. Didn't do too bad for me, actually. Leno averaged me 10.2 points per game in the, I think, 5 games I owned in 4. That was that period where Arsenal had the single game days and stuff. Did me fine. I don't mind. I know a lot of people are so against goalkeeper transfers. It is mad when you look at it and go, I had 9 goalkeepers this season, only 12 forwards. It's a bit mad when you reflect on that.
Yeah.
But no massive regrets. Interesting that most of my points still came from midfield, 1,132. But I think a lot of that is the fact that I captained Bruno Fernandes more times than anybody else. So I captained Bruno 21 times.
24 for me.
24. Should have been 22. I'm still annoyed about that. It didn't cost me much in the end. I think it might cost me 1 or 2 places that day where I feel like I got stitched up a little bit.
Did you have any monster returns from transfers?
Monster returns?
Points gained.
What would you call
they're
monster?
all over 100?
Yeah, quite a few. So, game week 20, I say game week 20, match day 20, going from Jimenez to De Bruyne. Match day 41, Vardy to Fernandes.
Match day 25, I went Ings to Kevin De Bruyne. That was a 123 point swing. That was a big one.
Match day 47, which was ironically a game where the 2 players I bought didn't play. I sold Matip and Gabriel, who had COVID and injury issues, for Stones and Diaz. Remember the day they was meant to play Everton when he got called off? Those 2 transfers were still worth 149 points to me.
Okay.
Lewis Dunk to Harry Kane, match day 85, was worth 131 points to me. Was there any points this season that cost you negatives?
1.
Yeah.
Dubravka to Patricio.
Oh, really?
-2, that cost me. And there was 1 that was neutral as a 0.
I did a
James Rodriguez to Wilfred Zaha.
I did a double transfer, which only lasted me three days, which was Diaz and Romeo out for Zuma and Neto. It cost me -2, and ended up buying Diaz back 3 days later because I'd realised I made a mistake and wasn't stubborn about it and went back for him. I think if I remember right, I sold him because I was convinced that he was going to get rested.
Yep.
And that didn't work out too well. That was the only one that there's a couple of transfers. The worst one, as I said, De Bruyne to Matip, match day 62, and ended up having to throw him straight back out, basically, was an awful one. Ironically, as well, a Dallas to Diaz for a little period actually only got me an 8-point gain. But most of the transfers on reflection, they're decent.
Yep.
They're decent. Even Pope to Dubravka at the end got me an extra 16 points.
Normally we're looking
Dunk to
at
Robertson when Dunk got injured, 22 points.
We're normally looking at fixture gains as well, so you're likely to see an upside on those. So
the best move for me all season was keeping Dunk. I stand by that.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Because it was such an obvious move to get Azpilicueta. I don't think anybody who did that transfer did bad. I went into that Chelsea-West Brom game shitting myself, knowing I was in big trouble if Chelsea kept a clean sheet.
Yep.
They just missed out that day, if I remember correctly. Just the 5 conceded. But then Dunk did me so well. He covered me at so many single game days and stuff. Even that night, Brighton played at Chelsea after the protest, wasn't it? And Azpilicueta wasn't in the team and Brighton kept a clean sheet. He did me so well, Dunking. I'm pretty sure that if you looked at a team of the season for the last... I haven't got the data with me for last season. But I think if you picked an 11 of different players from different clubs, you'd find that the best outcome would be having Lewis Dunk for both of the last 2 seasons.
Okay, interesting. Big shout out to Tala Nadeem. Won the Planet FPL League.
Tala's going to join us next week.
Shout out Tala.
If I say join us, you might be away, so it might just be me and Tala.
Yeah. You never know.
When did he finish overall, Tala? Smashed it about 11th, I think.
That is correct. Gladiators finished 11th.
I'm pretty sure it was his first Sky season as well.
Yeah.
That comment last summer, I know a lot of people picked up on it when I kept saying a first-time player can win this game. I know that's not happened, but I still feel that's absolutely correct. And if you're listening now and thinking, I've never played before, I'm telling you, you could be £50,000 richer this time next year.
Yeah, no doubt about it, James. I do agree.
This game is going to get harder every year because there are new players like Tala rocking up, and they're very good, and they pick up the game quickly because it is easy to pick up. So the game's going to get harder. I feel like the window of winning the £50,000 is only going to last a few more years, I think, because this game's going to get more popular and there's going to be more good players playing it. Correct. Thankfully, the Norwegians can't get in. It's handy.
Indeed. Well, you've heard of a VPN, James?
Yeah, but I still like to see him claim the prize.
Yes, indeed. Should we go to some Twitter questions for this end of season kind of sort of pod?
Let's do that, my friend.
Okie dokie. So let's go to Tala first, because Tala has put a question in. To add variety, do you think it's a decent option for Sky to change overhauls to wildcards?
I know there's a lot of people who, and we've only played the game for 2 years, there's a lot of people very against change of any sort. I feel like this year particularly, the second overhaul came at a period where not many people particularly felt like they either wanted it or needed it. Mm-hmm. And it literally forced people to get a ton of Manchester City players. I went with 7 or 8. I think I went with 8 in the end. And I mean, anybody who went with like less than 6 was in trouble, basically, is how it kind of worked out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it kind of forced people into that Manchester City route. It would probably be better if you chose when you use it, I think. I think a lot of people would still end up using the first one at a similar period because they'd realise, quite commonly, it's what a lot of us do, you make mistakes at the start of a new season, don't you? Very obvious.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what Tala's saying as well, James. I think the difficulty in games like this, and there's another question about it in Twitter, which we'll get to though, is when everything gravitates towards a template, it's much harder to break away. And if everybody's wildcarding at the same time, overhauling, let's say, at the same time, we're all playing with the same, we're all looking at the same next block of 3 to 5 or 6 fixtures. So we're all targeting the same teams. It's funny, we did the overhaul special for the second overhaul with Luke, right? And you and Luke were speaking before the show or after the show, and you basically had this, give or take, the same mindset on your overhaul teams. And you're both very good players. So it just goes to show that the mindset there, you gravitate towards templates. In addition to that, there's not tons of content out there. There's 4 or 5 maybe shows, and maybe 3 or 4 big ones that everyone listens to, similar shows again. So we gravitate towards the same think, and then it makes it more difficult to break away. So things that help break away from the template but don't break the structure of the game, I'm for. And I think so allowing people to pick the overhaul whenever they want to is probably a good idea.
I'd be for it.
I think actually that's a good suggestion. Who knows if people from Sky...
There's a lot of people out there would just say no, just get rid of them. Just have 40 transfers and crack on.
That would make the game harder.
Yes, which I don't mind.
No, of course. Tom Hartnell, SkyFF. How do you guys typically deal with a bad week in fantasy football? We've all had 1 or 2 this season, that's for sure.
Depends how Spurs have done.
It's so
that's
true,
boring,
isn't it?
But that's what bothers my weekend.
It's so true. Like there was 3 minutes when I'd missed the deadline on Sunday, medical reasons. You listen to the main FPL pod. I'd had my jab and was rough, slept through. Ouch. I spent 3 minutes thinking, oh, how annoying is that? Then I spent 1 minute thinking, oh, this will make a good story on the pod. And then I decided, well, there's only one thing that matters today. We've got to beat Southampton. Like, because the worst thing that could happen is we lose, you win, and then I've got to deal with that on the Monday of the pod, right? I was like, I just have to beat Southampton. And then, obviously, you look around, my kids are running around, smiley faces. I don't know if Tom does or doesn't have kids. And then you're just like, it's just life, right? It's just life. There are so many more important things than fantasy football. And here's my advice, Tom. Being good or bad at fantasy football doesn't make you a better or worse human being.
You sure about that?
Well,
because I know plenty who are good at fantasy football and they're right pricks.
No, but what I'm saying is them being good doesn't make them a bad person, and them being bad doesn't make them a good person.
I'm more likely to be a good person if they're bad at fantasy, I think, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, take life not too seriously. It really is. If it's getting you down, then you have to question, do I have enough things in my life that pick me up? Find other things that pick you up. Unfortunately, the thing that James gravitates towards gets him down as well, which is Tottenham.
Them lot piss me off.
So,
I think the thing I always say, if you can get yourself into a mindset where what I try and do, so I try not to watch the games and think about fantasy too much, other than always there an angle that I can use, be it an FPL or a Sky perspective that I can use in a podcast. I managed to get myself into a position where quite often I forget that I own certain players when I watch a game, and people might find that hard to believe. But I get myself into a mindset where I make the decision, I question the decision, I research the decision, am I right in the decision? And then shit can happen afterwards, and it's out of your control. Like, buying Matip was a panic move, and it was wrong, because it was on the spur of the moment. You could say the same might have happened with Dubravka, because I had 5 Man City players I wanted to buy and none of them played. Yeah. So, I mean, that didn't work out too badly in the end. But then the theory then to recover from Matip to buy Thiago Silva and captain him twice was correct. The result didn't work out.
And that was bad luck.
But the decision to do that was the correct move. So both had similar results. Matip got me nothing. Thiago Silva got me nothing. One was a bad move. One was a good move. Now, I think as long as you can look at yourself and say, I've made the right decision prior to... You can't... It's football, right? Look how many mad results there's been this season. If your theory's correct, then it's fine. I think even that, like the Azpilicueta move for Dunk, the theory was right to make the transfer. Nobody did wrong. You can all look at the outcome later and go, oh my God, I was 20 points worse off than if I'd stayed with Dunk. But how many people could have... If I'd have said to anyone, if you make that move, you're going to be 20 points worse off, everybody would have laughed at me.
Yeah.
So the theory behind the decision was still correct. I didn't think Dunk would outscore Azpilicueta over that period. I thought it would minimise the damage, that it wouldn't be too bad and wasn't worth it. I didn't for a second think Dunk would be outscoring him over that period.
Agreed.
So if you can make the theory right in terms of the decision, the outcome will be what it will be.
Correct.
You won't always win. As in, your captain's not going to return 100% of the time. It's clear. At least a third of the time, you are not going to make the right captain choice. And that goes for just about everybody.
Yeah. Jack at Palm Nation 2 says, thanks for all your podding throughout the season. I only tend to listen to you and the Sky Boys on Hub these days. That's cool. Listen to who you like. Your knowledge is unmatched, James. What about me, mate? What about me? What do you think about having one overhaul per season but activate it anytime you wish? I'm for the second half of that, activate anytime you wish. I'm not for one overhaul, because it's a long season, 38 weeks. I think having 2 is a better strategy. The
strategy behind when you use that first one would be big, particularly if you knew you'd made a lot of mistakes at the start of the season.
Yeah.
That's if you went overhaul game week 4 and then you haven't got another one, that's a long time to last without knowing if Team XYZ is going to suddenly run into that kind of period. I mean, it's worth saying now, isn't it? Whoever wins at Saturday is going to go and play Club World Cup in December.
Yeah.
So it's going to stack up for them at some point, isn't it? Where they're going to have 3-for-0s and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yorkshire Exile, shout out to him, says, I don't really listen to pods, but I've listened to a few of these, not for the fantasy advice, he tends to do his own thing, but the football knowledge is immense. Second that, James does have a football brain. I've probably got if
Thanks, mate.
If you die, Do you mind if I let them chop the top of your head off to check if there is actually just a football? Your brain is in the shape of a football.
It won't be a lot beneath the surface, I can promise you.
Is it white and black patches? But nowadays, football are fucking multicoloured, aren't they? So it won't be long before there's a football design that looks like a brain, no doubt, with the way that these football companies are. But yes, no problem. And thank you very much for your support, Yorkshire Exile. Stoke Gaffer, Kyle, what are your thoughts on a key pass tier to make midfielders better assets to own?
But midfield assets are great to own.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had De Bruyne at certain stages, great. Jack Grealish at certain stages, great. James Ward-Prowse has been under the majority of people's radar. Would have been great to sit in your team all season. Tielemans wouldn't have been bad. Mason Mount wouldn't have been bad. Most of these guys were kind of overlooked, actually. There are decent midfield assets.
Yeah, man. I'm not for changing.
If Fernandes, De Bruyne, and Grealish had all been at their peak all season, it's the same three midfielders everybody would have had, basically.
Correct. Agree with you. So yeah, point scoring is not where I would try and influence any rule changes in Sky for sure. But another rule change from Mark Williamson, who says, "Would you change the rules to limit the number of players you can pick from each team?"
So you can't have like the 8-man City players and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, look at you
That is
nutter.
miles away as well.
700 podcasts and he's still fucking letting his phone go off all the time. I mean, it's not even quiet.
Yeah.
I've forgotten the question now. What was the question?
Limit the number of players, mate.
Limit the number of players per team.
I'm not for it.
I think it's part of the gamble. You go for it or not, right?
I think the few little things that differentiate from FPL are what makes it a little bit different, and I like that. And I think when you see teams going with blanket defence and stuff like that, I just feel like, go for it, son. I like that part of the game where you can go all in. So yeah, it's not a change that I would make either. Nah.
No, I'm agreed. I'm for it because you've still got to have the cojones to do it. It's always,
of
oh
course,
my god,
man.
The 8 players worked out for you. I mean, if they did badly,
yeah.
There was a lot of us who still had.
You had so many City players. Getting loads of players from one club is fine. You've got to have a plan to get off them.
That's right.
How do you come out? And that's the difficult part when you go all in. And that's how do you stagger your strategy to come out of it. And I think that's a really important and interesting part of the game.
Even that period that City had, actually, if you reflect on it, I actually think the gains of getting that, it put me ahead having that many players. But actually, I don't think there were massive gains in it for me because it was so often that a player would get dropped. Yeah. Or they had a spell of about 4 games where they conceded a goal, didn't they? It was like West Ham at home, Southampton at home. So they weren't hitting the big points and stuff necessarily. So I don't think they were huge. If I could go back and do it again, in an odd way, I probably wouldn't have gone as heavy on them as I did because it would have saved me 4 transfers or so for something else.
Yeah, interesting. Ian Parrin's got a question. Shout out Ian. At some point we've got to get Ian on, haven't we?
Yeah, we'll
Come
do that.
on, man.
Superstar.
It'd be really good to get Ian on. So yeah, but we'll figure that out. Cheers for your hard work on Sky over the season, boys. Apart from the obvious in setting his team up properly each week, how can Suj James improve his play next year to get closer in rank to Planet FPL Pod? Better planning, player selection, captaincy choice, etc. So 100% planning is a key part of it. I think, do you know what, this season, with the early workday deadlines and stuff, this sounds like a stub story of my life, but just it's not important enough. You know, in a strange way, I look at it and I'm like, do you know what? With this effort and the risk involved, I reckon there's easier ways to make 50 grand.
Okay, do tell us.
No, just like through work and running a business and all the rest of it, I just look at it and I'm like, you know what? I'm enjoying playing. I'm not playing for the money. So a lot of people are playing for the money, right? If I won the money, it would be nice. But I don't really feel like I want to dedicate the extra 30 or 40 hours over a season for the money. Well, £1,000 an hour if I did an extra 50 hours, it would be pretty decent, wouldn't it?
If you knew you were going to take £800 out of it at the end, would you put a bit more time into it?
It makes me sound like a tosser to say no, but no, probably.
No, listen, £800 is not going to change anybody's life. I get that. Yeah, but then there's a little bit of a reward at the end.
Probably not. Because I don't know if this year is a particular case in point. where work can get busy. But I blink some days and it's 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, where's the fucking day gone? It's 3 or 4, and then there's a deadline in 2 hours. I've not spent any time thinking about it. And I don't really, like, in the evenings after 8 or 9 o'clock, I don't really like look at football spreadsheets or anything like that. So, yeah, it's definitely down to the planning, Ian. It's not really player selection, captaincy choice. We've seen, like, my captain points versus James. There was a big difference, but the number of times we got them right was only a couple of percent. You're talking, how many game days were there?
Oh, Ian would know.
Yeah, about 150 or something. So it was only like 4 or 5 occasions maybe where I could have got a better captaincy choice. Yeah, it's trying to find a way of making it more important in my life.
So this time last year, we decided that I was going to message you before every deadline in the final hour and say Sky reminder. And I think bar maybe 4 or 5 times I did that all the way through the season.
Yeah.
Right, it's not fucking helped you.
Nah.
I reckon best thing for you to do when we record a podcast on a Wednesday is sit down afterwards for 10, 15 minutes and decide there and then what plan A is.
Yeah. Maybe we should make it part of the show. So just team of the week or something. I don't know. Yeah.
I ain't telling you what to do because you're going to do the same as me then.
Yeah, that's
true. That might be a good idea.
We've got Ronarid who says, would scrapping man of the match points, another controversial topic,
I'd been there,
be a positive move? The process of picking the man of the match seems flawed at the moment. If not scrapping, should it be based off data?
I do think it's been better this year than it was last year. I agree.
Yeah.
I would say that. I don't think there's been as many bad last year. Before games started, after time, you could go, if he does all right today, he'll be man of the match. I don't think it felt quite like that this year. So I think they've probably listened to a little bit of feedback. But, yeah, I'd sack it off.
Yep.
I don't think it's necessary. Because the game has less unpredictability because of the tiering systems and stuff. And this just adds a layer of unpredictability to what can happen. Yeah.
I think when you're planning your strategy, like players that are highly likely to get tier points, you always think about. Players that are highly likely to get man of the match points is not even a consideration, is it, as part of the thinking of the game? So probably leave it. Fish FPL, do you think there's an optimal strategy to start with next year? Obviously fixture dependent, i.e. load up like we did on City to start until the overhaul, pick 7 or 8 players and then have the rest at certain price points to move around, best formation. Have you kind of given any thoughts to what you want to do next season at the start, or wait until the fixtures and prices come out, really?
No, the only thing I would say is on reflection, last year I went with players less tier focused. So at the start of the season I had people like Ryan Bertrand, Luca Dean, because I felt they had a good set of fixtures and they didn't do particularly bad for me. I think in hindsight I wouldn't go for those sort of players. I'd probably more go for the guarantee. But 2 things. 1, fixture is important. So I don't know, let's just say right now that Arsenal have a brilliant opening 4 fixtures or so and they've got 2 single game days. Well, suddenly someone like Nicolas Pepe is going to be all the rage come August, isn't he?
Yeah,
if it works out that way. Particularly in the case of someone like that, he's not playing in a major international tournament this summer. He's going to presumably have a full pre-season and stuff. You've got people like Salah's going to the Olympics, I think, isn't he? So he's going to be ruled out pre-first overhaul probably next season. So, I mean, until you've seen the TV, it's not even the fixtures, it's the TV fixtures. Until you've seen them, I wouldn't even overly think about it. When the game opens, I'll auto-pick. I won't even look at it till TV fixtures are up. There's no point.
FPL Junior. The midfield has been a bit of a wasteland for the past 2 seasons since Sky moved a number of midfielders to forwards. I mean, this is now going back to we started playing, to be fair with you. Do you think Sky should look to move a few forwards back? And if so, who potentially?
No, because I think all you'd end up then is everyone playing 4-5-1 instead.
Right.
If you had Mane's, Salah's, Sons and all these players go back to being midfielders, you just end up with them.
You've got to remember, because you can pick 5 midfielders and need 3 attackers, so it makes your forward choices harder.
Kane up front at 13 million would be the one up front for everyone, wouldn't it? No, it just reverses the what you'd want. Once you put them Salahs and that in there with the extra goal point in midfield and stuff as well, you just end up going with more midfield players. I don't think it makes a difference. As I said, there's been good budget forwards who've done well this year, like Bamford's, Iheanacho's, etc. At various points. have kind of made, even at certain points, Salah and not so much Kane, but Salah, it meant you could go without him this year for long periods. Mane, I know he's probably been a differential for a few people at the end, but large periods this year go without him. Raheem Sterling. Anybody who's bought Raheem Sterling probably any point this year has probably regretted it. Hi.
Stephen Lee. Why isn't there a Sky Fantasy Football for the Euros? No idea, mate. You've got two mates to play the Sky game this season, and now they do all their betting with Sky Bet, so it would have made economical sense. To be honest with you, we don't condone, gambling products and all that jazz.
No, we'll be on.
That's why Sky do have the game as a gateway into Sky Bet.
Yes, ultimately.
So proof that it's worked is there. But
it's probably down to some sort of sponsorship thing as well, right?
Yeah,
Remember, Sky aren't covering European Championships in terms of live game perspective, so there's probably a little bit of influence on that. Plus, I think it's a big deal to set it up for Sky when
short. It's a 6-week, 7-week tournament.
I'd have said so. Would you trust them to get it right over 7 games? Probably not.
Nah.
We'll be podding on the official Euro fantasy game all summer.
Yeah. The Championship Fantasy Podcast, EFL_fantasy. If you could only play this or FPL next season, which would it be?
This, 100%.
Yeah, me too. Honestly, me too.
It's not even close.
I think, actually, coming back to Ian Parrin's question, what would make me better at Sky is if I stopped playing FPL.
It's the end of Planet FPL, isn't it?
Can you imagine that?
Can I imagine us doing our main FPL podcast and not having any banter to have with you at the start of it because you haven't fucked something up this week?
Do you know what? It's a very FPL still first for me over Sky, I would say, over the course of the season. Whereas it's completely flipped for you. It didn't flip enough for me.
There's plenty of times I know I've spoken about kind of switching off. There are plenty of times that I've watched games and been so Sky headspace in it that I've forgotten that I've had that player in FPL. Definitely. Because it's been way more important to me what they did in Sky. I would still pod on FPL. I've said this before previously. It's not enough if you're listening to the Sky ones. But I would definitely play Sky out of the two.
There was game week 2, match week 2 or what have you. I scored 140 points in Sky. And I think I jumped up to 2,000 as my rank.
You were 2,000 game week 2. You finished worse.
Yeah. There was a moment then, I remember it, because I was thinking 2,000. This has set me up now. I can push on. And then I had a couple of bad game weeks, 55 and 57 points. Then it recovered a little bit, but I'm just looking here. It doesn't show my rank, but. It got worse from there, and at the point where you're like, okay, I can't get into that top 1,000 or top 500, that's when you get easy to demoralise from it. So maybe if I could have stayed up there, I think I would have done better, but you never know. Ollie Paul, James, you finished 120 points off first. How much of that difference do you attribute to luck, like 50-50 captains, transfers, and how much is identify improvements you can make next season? In other words, what would you do differently? What would you do differently? I mean, we can talk about, there's a number of people that ask, but luck versus bad strategy from your 120 points.
You definitely need luck. There's no getting around that. I think that there is a lot of skill element to Sky in certain times, though, like going Kane over Salah or vice versa at certain stages is a big call. That's going to be a big difference to you. I mean, I think you and I, biggest score of the season individually, I think was Kane against Palace, wasn't it? I think we had the
46
same
points.
And because Spurs were the late game that day as well, there was not really a doubt that Kane would play, but it was a risk. I can't remember who Salah had that day, but it was a big risk not going. It was a close call.
Yep.
I think most went for Kane that day, but that's the sort of thing that's going to make like a 40-point difference to your season. So that's it, isn't it? You need 3 different swings of that, basically, or 6 bigger, smaller swings to holding on to Lewis Dunk and having him sit there and get me 20 pointers against Everton on Monday nights and things like that.
Yep.
There isn't a lot I would change. I think I know what some of the mistakes were. I can look back on some of the names that I bought during this season. I mean, I criticised Matip, but the first time I bought him, it was him that really shot me through into the top 100 for the first time because he was a brilliant little differential for me. I know the players that I bought that were good and those that were bad, and I know which ones in hindsight I wouldn't make again. Would it have made that much of a difference? No, I don't think I was ever in a realistic chance of actually finishing first. 120 points though, when you put it like that and go, oh, that's Kane over Salah going off mental 3 times over, could be the difference. But maybe a man who won it made all the same decisions, right? And he went Kane. I'm sure he probably went Harry Kane that day. You need all of those really to go right for you. It would be interesting to know how many times he had a head-to-head call like that and made the wrong one. I imagine majority of times he made the right call.
Phantom Mansell says, I made the Patricio error this season. How did you guys do with your goalkeepers? We talked about 230 and you got 280. And do you think it's an underrated position?
Yeah, I really do. Just purely from the perspective of clean sheet, 9 points. Straight off. So if I need for forward to score 9, I need him to score and hit shots here.
Yeah.
Is the reality. I just think it's so easy for some of the goalkeepers. And when you take ones who you identify who are going to be making saves, like Martinez's and Meslier's and stuff, you know, if you stick the armband on them, and if they keep it out, it's every chance you're looking at 22 points, same as Pope that night at Fulham. I do think that's underestimated, because I promise you every one of us would take 11 pointers times 2 every time we captain the player.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important position. I think early thoughts for someone who might be good next year is Sanchez at Brighton. Might be good, but then Lewis Dunk. I'm interested to see what price Lewis Dunk will be next year, to see if after both of these 2 years being so consistent, because I think his points total from the year before was very similar. That's what 170, 180, something like that. If he'll get a bit of a hike. But it's not fashionable, is it, to give a price hike to a player who plays in defence for a team who finished 16th?
Yep.
So, I mean, if he's similar price, he's the sort of one I'd just set and forget, I think, next year. As long as Potter's still manager and that as well. You get your goalkeeper right. I guess that's part of it for me transfer-wise, is sometimes I haven't got the right one. But I just feel like it's such an easy get out when you've got that Palace playing Burnley and Newcastle on Monday and Friday consecutively. Okay, so Gator only picked me up, I think it was 12 points, including the captaincy over the 2 games or something. But it could be 44 or so, couldn't it? Right?
Yeah.
I just think it's such an easy get out, rather than when you've got 3 teams like that playing against each other, looking at your Woods and your St. Maximins and stuff like that. I just feel the keeper's the easy get out so often.
Benny says he's still licking his wounds, no doubt, but ready to go next season. His question's around the second team. What did you do with your second team? How did it do? And do we need to dissect that with the pod at some point?
We'll do that, because we dissected what my plan was on a Patreon podcast in pre-season. It finished 298th.
Beat me.
Yeah, just. My strategy with it, and I veered off it, which I'm disappointed at. But I veered off it because it wasn't doing as well as I thought it would do. But the strategy behind it was to only have 1 player from 11 teams and leave it dead, unless you have to make a transfer
to get a captain.
To make a captain, and then obviously from there, then
yeah.
you can alternate who the pick is. So I mean, let's just say I went Laporte at the start of the season. It's fairly obvious that Ruben Diaz is killing it. Obviously, you can move Laporte to Diaz, but generally speaking, you got 11. Your captaincies are covered. You leave it. You have a set principal idea, irrespective of fixture, who you're going to captain. But I decided not to do that. So the idea being you'd rank them. So pre-season I'd have gone, right, Van Dijk, Fernandes, De Bruyne, Kane, maybe, for example. And irrespective of the fixture, you stick to that sort of order. But I veered off that. But it ended up finishing quite well. I mean, 298 is all right, isn't it?
It's very good for a team that's restricted.
But we worked out last year that if you had the right 11 at the start, and all you needed to do was make transfers to cover the single game days, you could basically win the game only making about 14 transfers.
Yep.
If you got that right. And I think the Hub Boys on Sunday night were highlighting a team that similarly, if you left it dead and just captained it correctly, you could have won it and stuff. Yeah. The only difference with theirs to my principal idea is they had like 2 or 3 players from the same team and stuff. Yeah. So you wouldn't have had as much. You'd have had to make more transfers if you wanted to get the captaincy coverage and stuff.
Correct.
I will probably do that again next year. And I think with an extra year's worth of data, I would have a better idea of who to go to. Like Lewis Dunk in that team could probably be 10 million and he'll go in and just leave it dead.
Yeah. Tim Barry, shout out Tim. His second question is about the second overhaul, scrapped or modified. We talked about overhaul plenty. What's your view on, do you think Sky should create another tier for tackles, passing, saves and shots on target?
I think
Tier 1, Tier 2 at the moment. Tier 3? It's 2 points and 3 points.
the thing is, and this is what I always say about the tiering, the easiest one to read is the passing tiers. It's fucking obvious. It's also what seems to get picked up the most. I haven't seen the tiering breakdown for the season, but I imagine there's a lot more passing tiers were dished out than tackles and shots. So whether there's something they would look at, but they did adjust it a bit last year, didn't they? In terms of tackles here, they adjusted, didn't they? And I don't think it really correlated the way. Last year we had loads of players like Ricardo Pereira, Richarlison and stuff, tackle monsters. I don't really feel like we talked about tackle tier monsters this year. There weren't that many that stood out. Guys like Ayling and Dallas did really well and stuff.
Wan-Bissaka's quite often a good tackler.
Wan-Bissaka, yeah, but I don't feel. I almost feel like because of the obviousness of the passing tiers, the tackle tiers, it just not stood out. Maybe more the answer is to make the threshold for passing higher. That would fucking upset a lot of people.
Batman Joe, are you looking forward to getting the fixtures for TV a lot further in advance than we had this year? Yeah, man. Of course.
I think in hindsight, and I won't be able to answer this for 12 months, I think the short-term nature of this season helped me.
No doubt about it.
I've said that before because I was able to identify problem areas. Like when I bought Gator on the first overhaul, it was because I identified a group of fixtures that they had, even though not having the TV fixtures, and went, something in there is going to be a big fucking problem.
Yep.
So when it landed with Palace having those 2 single game days, the one benefit you can say about me having Gator in that period was he was already there. So I didn't waste the transfer to having to get someone in, for example. I think that benefited me because I'm able to see the problems better. So I think that the long-term planning it won't make the game more difficult for me. It'll make the game easier, but it'll also make it easier for a lot more other people.
Well.
Correct?
Yeah, for sure. Chris Hermitage, what's the biggest lesson you learned from playing this year that can help you next season? I was far more engaged in Sky this year and had a firm sense of the rules, so you finished 800 after 18k the previous year. Good rank jump and respect that, Chris. I think I went too often with a differential rather than going with the crowd, and in Sky it can, if they go off, it can really hurt you. You talk about effective ownership having an impact in FPL. I don't know if you'd agree, but I feel like in Sky it can have an even bigger impact because the returns that you get of captains can be massive. We talked about these 40-50 pointers, so quite often it as tempting as it is to be differential, it's not always necessarily advisable. So don't try and be too clever is what I'm going to do next season, where I have done this year. I love a punt. The 2 points
I want to make is, first is the first season I played, I was too far behind to give myself a chance and finished like quite strongly, finished 270th or something, but I was miles behind. Like I was going into final 4 or 5 game weeks at like just about inside the top 1k or something. I had loads of transfers left. Mm-hmm. This year, I got myself in a position to give myself an actual chance of finishing first. And although that didn't happen, I feel like that's important. You almost basically, you can't go into that second overhaul period because then everyone's going with the same team. If you're in a bad position, then you're probably going to stay in a bad position.
Yeah.
Unless you go really differential and it pans out for you. And obviously from that stage, it can go a lot worse for you. The other thing is, I look at, say, some of the transfers I've got this year. So everyone's got the kind of story of their worst player for the season. So for me, it's like Matip was one of the worst and one of the best. And a lot of people, Vestergaard was one of the best at the right time, but one of the worst from second overhaul. I mean, all of us like me who went Vestergaard over Dallas on the second overhaul were like, what the fuck in hindsight? But perfect example is Maddison. So I bought James Maddison when I bought Iheanacho. And I bought Maddison because I wanted a differential punt to try and give me something different for the end, to give me half a shot of still winning the game. You reflect on it afterwards. You know what Maddison got me? 7 games. 15 points.
Oof.
In 7 games.
That's rubbish.
The Bravka, who I sat here and moaned about last week, got me minus points as captain. Got me fucking 18 points in the last 2. He ended up getting me more points than what Maddison got, who I bought 7 game weeks ago.
Wow.
So, but then do I reflect on that and go, well, that was a big mistake? Well, of course, in hindsight, you don't want to get a player for 7 games who's only going to get you 15 points. But it was a punt for a purpose.
Mm.
I could have just bought Nicolas Pepe on the final day, would have got me more points than Maddison.
Looking at Aaron Ramsdale, 11 points, 2.8 points per game.
But you started with him, didn't you?
Yeah.
So did I.
Yeah, rubbish. I probably didn't come off him quick enough.
Good job we had that first overhaul after 4 game weeks.
True. Even those first 4 game weeks were painful. Last question of the show, James. We've been through all 20 questions that we had, and thank you everybody that did. Was Fantasy Football Ninja. The template teams in Sky tend to be very similar. How could Sky bring in more variables to the game to break the template?
Higher prices. Very straightforward. I mean, what price, if Harry Kane does go to Manchester City and he's available to start from, Pep Guardiola says pre-game week 1, yep, Harry Kane starting game week 1. And they've got, I don't know, let's say they've got Palace at home. What price does Harry Kane need to be for people not to start with him?
Nah. They couldn't. Like 20 million.
So do you price him at 20 million?
Nah.
20 would be too much. But no, that's what I'm saying. If you put Kane in at 14 or so...
He's in.
He probably would have to be, wouldn't he, in that circumstance?
Yeah.
But I think longer term, that would stop the kind of the 99% ownership and stuff like that. I mean, Bruno, he's got to have a big jump, isn't he?
Mm.
But then... KDB will come back on the radar at some point next year, won't he? We're going to have growing, developing players like Phil Foden, etc. do better next year. Mason Mount, Jack Grealish will come back. He'll have a bigger price. But I always feel that the pricing is under in Sky. Because invariably, there are people like Siyunchu 2 years ago, Dallas this year, who inevitably fall into that. They almost render everybody else at that similar price irrelevant. Now that would happen again, maybe, because who was the fellow? Dan Burn, wasn't it? Was he 4.6 last season?
Yeah. Cheap.
You could just leave in there, and that's why no one had Dunk, for example, the year before. And it becomes a 10-player game and stuff like that. So I think bigger pricing throughout, but I think bigger pricing particularly for the premiums would be ideal. One suggestion would even maybe be to mix it up on the second overhaul, is reprice the players. We've had that discussion before, but I would not trust them to get that right.
I think that's too much of a variable for my liking. So there we go. That was all the questions, James. That was a solid hour on Sky Fantasy Football, even though there's no games to talk about. So thank you for your questions. Hope you enjoy this kind of little wrap-up.
Captain in the Champions League final. Big shout out to Andrew Ferguson as well. Good luck.
Who am I captaining
at the
in the
weekend?
Champions League final?
I'm taking the piss, mate. Oh. Andrew's still first in Dream Team, isn't he?
Come on, Fergie.
Good luck, pal.
Come on, Fergie. I can't believe, I'm genuinely so rooting for that guy to win it, because it'd just be nice to for him.
He's coming for a beer with us on 24th of July as well.
Oh, so, is he? So he's buying. He's doing
the fucking bar, isn't he?
Yes, Fergie. Come on, son.
What was the minimum spend at that bar? 1,500 quid or something?
Per Fergie.
Yeah, well, Andrew, you got 48.5 grand left or something, mate.
Oh, lovely. Nah, that's not going to be no problem. We really enjoy it, but regardless of winning or not, to be a front runner for so long in that game, good lad. Well
good
done.
Luck, pal.
And everybody else, thank you for tuning in.
I'll shout out Ben Cameron as well, who won our Patreon mini league.
He did.
75 quid in the bank for Ben. I know he was first at one stage. I think he finished 13th in the end. Brilliant
Nice.
season. I think it was Ben's first season as well, I want to say, maybe.
Good.
Absolute
nice
stormer. It was 25 quid for second in that Patreon mini league, but unfortunately that's me, so I saved you 25 quid there, mate.
Lovely jubbly. Saved yourself some money too. Thank you for tuning in. Wherever you're listening to the show, hit subscribe or the notification bell or follow or whatever the button is on that platform, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, whatever it may be. And if you're really an engaged Sky player, then you may want to consider looking at patreon.com/planetfpl. A number of listen, you came 30th and you were only 6th in our Patreon league, weren't you? Because there was 5 players above you.
Podcast league.
Podcast league, yeah. There were 5 players above you, so just goes to show that within the Slack channel there are a number of very good Sky players, all helping each other, interacting. There's a Sky planning spreadsheet in there as well that helps you with your fixtures and stuff. So might be worth a consideration if you sign up now before Monday. I can't figure out when the 31st of May is. You'll get June and July free, which will be a nice time to plan and learn about it and decide if you really enjoy being one of our patrons. So do head over to patreon.com/planetfpl. And that's the lot, mate.
I was going to say specifically, probably when the game reopens as well, our first few Sky podcasts will probably be on Patreon because we've got other stuff planned in terms of themed weeks during the start of the season. So I don't want to sell that and say I'm incorrect, but it's possible that will happen.
Correct. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks for your support. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Tell Nadeem next week. Cue music, please, man, child.